The Zelvarians were a race obsessed with symmetry. Their shimmering violet skin, flawless features, and perfectly balanced physiques were not just traits of beauty. They were marks of moral and intellectual superiority. To the Zelvarians, symmetry was more than skin deep. It symbolized harmony within oneself and the universe. This cultural obsession had deep roots, originating in ancient myths that claimed their godlike ancestors achieved enlightenment through the perfection of their forms. Over centuries, this belief evolved into an unyielding societal standard, shaping every aspect of Zelvarian life. This standard dictated Liara's fate before she was even born. Her malformed left leg, a genetic anomaly, made her an aberration in a society that worshipped perfection. Her family, once proud members of the Zelvarian elite, saw her defect as a stain on their lineage. They avoided speaking of it openly, but their actions revealed their shame. Her mother's attempts to hide her condition with long robes and secluded living quarters only amplified Liara's awareness of her own inadequacy. Her father, a stoic figure, rarely acknowledged her presence, his silence heavier than any insult. For a time, Liara tried to earn their approval, hoping that her intelligence or creativity might compensate for her physical flaw. She excelled in studies, mastering Zelvarian history and philosophy, but it was never enough. Her parents' rare moments of affection always felt forced, like reluctant obligations. Her mother's hand on her shoulder lingered too briefly. Her father's praise always delivered in a tone devoid of warmth. When the other children of their social circle visited, Liara was hidden away, told it was for her own good. As she grew older, the whispers within her household turned louder. How will we present her at the annual gathering? What will the council say if they see her? These conversations weren't meant for her ears, but she heard them all the same. The final blow came on her 18th birthday when her parents informed her she would be sent to Earth, a planet far from the Zelvarian homeworld. They spoke of it as an opportunity, a chance to live among humans where physical flaws were less stigmatized. But their eyes betrayed their true motives. They wanted her gone, erased from their lives, so they could continue their pursuit of perfection without her shadow darkening their legacy. The journey to Earth was cold and isolating. Liara clutched a small suitcase containing all her possessions, her violet skin shimmering faintly under the harsh artificial lighting of the transport ship. The other passengers avoided her, their sideways glances filled with disdain or pity. By the time she arrived on Earth, her hope for a new beginning had dwindled to a flicker. Earth's human city was a labyrinth of noise and motion. Towering skyscrapers stretched toward a gray sky, their glass surfaces reflecting the chaos below. The air smelled of oil and rain, and the streets were alive with the chatter of merchants, the hum of vehicles, and the occasional bark of a street performer's music. For the humans bustling through this urban sprawl, it was a place of opportunity and grit. For Liara, it was a battlefield she was unprepared to face. Her wheelchair, a clunky, outdated model provided by Interstellar Aid, became her greatest enemy. Its wheels snagged on cracked sidewalks, and its joints squealed with every movement. She tried to navigate the busy streets, but the flow of humanity moved too quickly for her. People brushed past her without so much as a glance. Some muttered impatiently when she blocked their path, while others simply ignored her altogether. The first night, Liara found herself in an alley, the walls around her damp with condensation. She shivered beneath a thin blanket, her stomach growling as the city's lights cast fractured colors onto the wet pavement. She reached for the last piece of stale bread she'd salvaged earlier, but stopped when a stray animal, a small, scrawny creature with matted fur, appeared at the edge of her vision. It stared at her with wide, hungry eyes. With a sigh, she tossed the bread toward it, watching as it disappeared into the shadows. In the weeks that followed, her life became a cycle of survival. She scavenged for food in dumpsters, avoided confrontations with other homeless individuals, and prayed her wheelchair wouldn't break down entirely. Her violet skin, once luminous and admired, now drew stares of curiosity and disdain. Humans found her alien appearance unsettling, while the rare Zelvarians she encountered treated her as a disgrace. One Zelvarian merchant even sneered, "You're what they call us behind our backs, a race of the perfect, undone by the imperfect." The words stung, but she lacked the strength to argue. One evening, as the rain began to fall, Liara sat motionless in her wheelchair at the edge of a busy street. Her hands, raw and blistered from days of wheeling herself across uneven terrain, rested limply in her lap. The neon signs above her flickered, their colors bleeding onto the wet asphalt. She felt the first drops of rain on her skin, but didn't move to shield herself. What was the point? Her wheelchair creaked ominously, a reminder that even this small semblance of independence was on the verge of collapse. And then it did. A loud snap echoed through the street as the chair's frame gave way, spilling her onto the ground. She cried out as her hands scraped against the rough pavement, her body crumpled in a heap. Around her, the city moved on, its inhabitants too busy or indifferent to stop. Liara tried to push herself upright, but her arms trembled from exhaustion. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not like this. Are you all right?" The voice was calm and steady, cutting through the noise around her. She looked up to see a man kneeling beside her. He had dark, wavy hair that fell just above his brows and eyes that were both piercing and kind. His olive-toned skin glistened faintly in the rain, and his brow furrowed with genuine concern. Liara hesitated. Kindness was a rarity in her life, and she didn't trust it easily. "I'm fine," she muttered, though the pain in her voice betrayed her. The man didn't move. "You don't look fine. Let me help you." She wanted to refuse, to tell him to leave her alone, but her body wouldn't cooperate. He gently helped her sit upright, his hands firm but respectful. "My name's Felix," he said, offering her a small smile. "What's yours?" Liara stared at him, unsure how to respond. "Liara," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "Nice to meet you, Liara," Felix said, his tone light but genuine. "Let's get you out of the rain." In that moment, something shifted. For the first time in years, someone saw her, not as a burden, not as an aberration, but as a person worth helping. And though she didn't yet know it, Felix's kindness would become the catalyst for a transformation she had never imagined possible. The sound of humming machinery filled the room as Liara stirred, her body sluggish and uncooperative. The ache in her limbs reminded her of her fall, the rain-soaked street, and the moment her wheelchair gave way beneath her. She blinked, disoriented by the soft, warm light overhead. This wasn't the alley where she'd crumpled, defeated and exhausted. The sterile tang of oil and metal hung in the air, mixing with something faintly sweet, like coffee. She sat up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. Her surroundings were a chaotic symphony of wires, tools, and half-assembled machines. Shelves crowded with gadgets lined the walls, and every surface seemed alive with blinking lights or softly whirring contraptions. The space felt industrious but personal, as if each item had a purpose only its creator could decipher. For a fleeting moment, she forgot where she was and how she had gotten there. "Good, you're awake." The voice startled her. She turned quickly, too quickly, and winced as her back tensed. Felix stood in the doorway, a steaming mug in his hand. He wasn't the towering figure she'd imagined in her half-conscious state. His frame was lean but solid, his shoulders squared with an ease that suggested quiet confidence. His dark, wavy hair looked slightly damp, as if he'd just come in from the rain, and his olive-toned skin caught the glow of the overhead lights. He studied her, his expression unreadable but not unkind. "You were out for a while," he continued, walking into the room and setting the mug on a table near her. "I wasn't sure if you'd wake up today or tomorrow." "Where am I?" Liara's voice came out hoarse, like she hadn't used it in days. "My workshop," Felix replied, gesturing to the room around them. "It's not much, but it beats the alley where I found you." The memory rushed back. His face in the rain, the broken wheelchair, the weight of his arm as he'd helped her to her feet. Embarrassment and unease flared in her chest. She wasn't used to being helped, and she certainly wasn't used to kindness. You shouldn't have, she said, her voice sharper than she intended. I didn't ask for your help. Felix raised an eyebrow, unperturbed. No, you didn't. But I wasn't going to leave you there. Liara looked away, her gaze landing on the blinking machines scattered across the room. She hated how vulnerable she felt, how her weakness had been laid bare in front of this stranger. What do you want from me? She asked quietly, her tone laced with suspicion. Felix sighed, pulling up a chair and sitting across from her. Not everything comes with strings attached, you know? Some people help because they want to, not because they expect something in return. That hasn't been my experience, she muttered, her voice barely audible. Felix leaned back, his expression softening. Fair enough. Life has a way of beating that belief into you. But I'm not here to hurt you or take anything from you. You needed help, and I helped. That's all. She studied him, searching for the hidden angle, the ulterior motive. His face betrayed nothing but calm sincerity, and it unnerved her. People didn't act like this. Not in her world. Her stomach growled loudly, breaking the silence. Felix smirked, standing and walking to a counter where a plate sat covered with a cloth. You've been out for a while. Figured you'd be hungry when you woke up. He brought the plate over and set it in front of her. Toast and sliced fruit. Simple, but far better than anything she'd eaten in weeks. She hesitated, staring at the food as though it might disappear if she touched it. When Felix didn't move or speak, she reached for a slice of toast, her hands trembling. The first bite was a revelation, warm, crisp, and real. She ate quickly, ashamed of how desperate she must have looked, but unable to stop herself. Felix didn't comment, letting her eat in peace. When she finished, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. So, what's your story, Liara? She stiffened at the sound of her name, the casual way he said it as if they were old friends. How do you know my name? You told me last night, right before you passed out. Liara frowned, her memories of the previous night a blur. She shook her head. There's nothing to tell. There's always something to tell, Felix said, his voice gentle but persistent. You don't end up alone on a street corner in the rain without a story. She wanted to snap at him, to tell him to leave her alone. But the warmth in his gaze and the steady patience in his voice made her pause. For the first time in years, someone seemed to care, not out of obligation, but because they wanted to. The wall she'd built around herself felt fragile under his gaze. I was sent here, she said finally, her voice tight. Exiled. My family didn't want me. They said Earth would be a better place for me, but they just wanted to get rid of me. Felix's expression didn't change. He didn't pity her or offer empty platitudes. He simply nodded. Families can be cruel. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones who hurt us the most. His words cut through her defenses, hitting a nerve she hadn't realized was exposed. She looked at him surprised. You sound like you know something about that. Felix hesitated, his gaze dropping briefly before meeting hers again. Maybe I do, but this isn't about me. The deflection left her curious, but she didn't press. She wasn't ready to share more of herself, and she wasn't sure she wanted to know more about him. Instead, she glanced around the workshop, eager to change the subject. What is this place, anyway? You build robots? Felix chuckled, the sound low and warm. Close. I design prosthetics and assistive tech. Mostly for humans, though I've worked with a few alien clients. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and helps people. Her gaze lingered on a robotic hand resting on one of the tables, its fingers moving in slow, deliberate patterns. You help people walk again? She asked quietly. Felix followed her gaze, his tone softening. Yeah, and run, climb, dance, whatever they want to do. Why? Liara hesitated, her throat tightening. The words felt heavy in her chest, but she forced them out. Could you help me? Felix didn't answer right away. He studied her, his expression thoughtful. Help you walk, he asked gently. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I haven't walked since I was a child. I thought I'd made peace with it, but I don't want to live like this anymore. Felix leaned forward, his eyes steady on hers. I can help you, but it's not just about walking. It's about reclaiming your life, your freedom. Are you ready for that? Her heart pounded in her chest, fear and hope warring within her. She wanted to believe him, but the scars of her past held her back. What if it doesn't work? Then we try again, Felix said without hesitation. And again until it does. The simplicity of his answer left her stunned. For the first time in years, she felt the faintest flicker of hope. She nodded slowly, her voice trembling. All right, I'll let you try. Felix grinned, the warmth of it chasing away the shadows that had lingered in her mind for so long. Good, let's get started. As he stood and began gathering tools, Liara watched him, her chest tight with a mix of fear and anticipation. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she dared to believe it might hold something better. The workshop buzzed with quiet determination, a symphony of whirring machines and the occasional metallic clink of tools. Liara sat at the edge of a sturdy stool, her hands gripping the edges as if the world might shift beneath her. Felix moved around the room with the precision of someone who lived and breathed his work, his footsteps purposeful and deliberate. The air smelled faintly of oil, metal, and something sharper, like heated circuits. On the table in front of her lay the prosthetic. Sleek and silver, its smooth lines gave it an almost organic appearance, like a limb waiting to awaken. Its surface gleamed under the overhead lights, the metallic sheen reflecting the room's vibrant energy. Yet, for all its beauty, the sight of it made her stomach twist. Still with me? Felix's voice broke through her thoughts, steady and calm. Liara glanced at him, her violet skin catching the faint glow of the workspace. I'm not going anywhere, she said, though her tone carried more nerves than resolve. He smiled faintly as he adjusted a small control panel on the side of the prosthetic. Good, because once we start, it'll be a lot harder to turn back. His words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Liara tried to imagine what her life would look like after this. For years, she'd adapted to the limits of her wheelchair, letting it define her world. The idea of standing again, of walking, felt both thrilling and impossible. Felix placed a handheld device on the table, its screen glowing with lines of data. All right, he began, turning to face her fully. Here's how this works. The prosthetic will connect directly to your nervous system. It's designed to interpret the signals your brain sends, mimicking the way a natural leg would move. But this isn't plug and play. Your body will need time to adjust. Liara nodded, her throat tightening. And if it doesn't adjust? Felix leaned against the table, his expression softening. Then we tweak it. That's the beauty of technology. It can adapt just as much as you can. The only thing that matters is whether you're ready to try. His confidence was unsettling, but also oddly reassuring. She took a deep breath, willing herself to let go of the doubts coiled in her chest. Let's do it. Felix's smile widened, not triumphant but encouraging, as if he knew how much that decision had cost her. All right, first we calibrate. He grabbed a set of small sensors and carefully knelt beside her. I'm going to place these around the base of your leg. They'll read your neural activity and help the prosthetic sync up. Liara tensed as his fingers brushed her skin. His touch was clinical but gentle, and she couldn't remember the last time someone had handled her with such care. She watched as he worked, attaching the sensors with precision. The faint hum of the equipment filled the silence between them. Does it hurt? He asked, glancing up. No, she said quickly, though her voice sounded smaller than she intended. It just feels strange. Good strange or bad strange? Both, she admitted, and Felix chuckled softly. He stood, holding a small device that resembled a scanner. As he waved it over her leg, it emitted a soft blue light. Numbers and symbols flickered across the screen, and Felix's brow furrowed in concentration. Your nerve responses are strong, he said after a moment. That's a good sign. The prosthetic should be able to pick up your brain's signals without much interference. She didn't know how to respond, so she stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the leg resting on the table. It felt like staring at a locked door, one that might open to freedom or collapse under her weight. Felix set the scanner down and picked up the prosthetic. He handled it like a craftsman admiring his work, his movements careful and deliberate. This part's where it gets interesting. Once I attach it, the interface will start syncing with your body. You might feel some tingling or pressure, but that's normal. Liara nodded, gripping the stool tighter. What if it doesn't work? Felix paused, meeting her gaze. Then we try again, and again, until it does. His certainty left no room for doubt. And for the first time, Liara felt a flicker of something she hadn't known in years: trust. She swallowed hard and straightened her back. All right, let's do this. Felix smiled, his expression both calm and determined. Here we go. He knelt beside her again, holding the prosthetic with both hands. With practiced precision, he aligned it with the base of her leg. A faint click echoed through the room as it locked into place. Liara flinched as a surge of energy coursed through her. Not painful, but electric, like a current awakening something dormant. Breathe, Felix said, his voice steady. That's the interface activating. Let it settle. She exhaled slowly, focusing on the sensations. The prosthetic felt alien, yet strangely familiar, as if it were testing the boundaries of her nerves. She glanced at Felix, who was watching her carefully. Try moving your toes, he suggested. Liara hesitated, the idea of controlling the metallic limb feeling absurd. She closed her eyes, concentrating on the thought of movement. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, ever so faintly, the toes curled. Her eyes flew open in shock. There it is, Felix said, his grin widening. Keep going. Emboldened, Liara focused again. The ankle flexed, the knee bent slightly. Each movement was clumsy, but undeniable, a small victory over the limitations that had defined her. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Felix stood, extending a hand. Ready to stand? Her heart raced. I don't know if I can. You can, he said firmly. And if you can't, I'm here. His confidence felt like a lifeline. She reached for his hand, her grip tightening as she braced herself. Slowly, she shifted her weight, pushing off the stool. The prosthetic wobbled beneath her, and panic surged. Felix steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. Breathe, he said again. You're doing fine. She took a shaky breath and adjusted her stance. The prosthetic held, bearing her weight as she straightened. Her chest tightened as the realization hit her. She was standing. I'm standing, she whispered, disbelief laced in her voice. You're standing, Felix echoed, his smile soft but proud. The moment stretched, the hum of the workshop fading into the background. For the first time in years, Liara felt taller than her doubts, stronger than her fears. She wasn't whole. Not yet, but she was more than she had been. Felix stepped back slightly, giving her space. Ready for the next part? What's the next part? She asked, still gripping his hand for balance. He grinned, walking. Liara's breath caught, but she nodded. All right. Felix guided her first step, his movements patient and steady. The prosthetic responded, its joints mimicking the flow of a natural leg. Each step was awkward but deliberate, a series of small victories building towards something larger. By the time she reached the end of the room, Liara was breathless but smiling. She turned to Felix, her voice trembling with emotion. Thank you. He shook his head. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. Liara looked down at the prosthetic, the metallic surface gleaming like a promise. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a void. It felt like something she could walk toward, one step at a time. The morning sun streamed through the workshop's narrow windows, painting the cluttered space in streaks of pale gold. Liara stood in the open center of the room, her posture tentative but determined. Her metallic leg hummed faintly, responding to her shifts in weight like a patient companion. Each movement felt smoother than the last, her body slowly learning to trust this foreign extension of herself. For the first time in years, she wasn't confined to the limits of her wheelchair. The realization was thrilling and terrifying. Felix leaned against a nearby table, sipping from a steaming mug. His hair was tousled, his shirt rumpled from a long night of adjustments and calibrations. Despite his disheveled appearance, his eyes were sharp, watching Liara with a mixture of pride and quiet calculation. You're moving better already, he said, his voice breaking the silence. Liara glanced at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. It still feels strange, like my brain can't decide if this is real. Felix chuckled, setting the mug down. That's normal. You're reprogramming years of muscle memory. It takes time, but you're ahead of the curve. She tapped the metal toes of her prosthetic against the floor, marveling at how natural the motion was becoming. How long until it feels like mine? Felix rubbed the back of his neck, thinking, depends on you. A week, maybe two, if you keep pushing yourself like this. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of doubt. And if I fall? Then you get up, Felix said firmly. You're going to fall, Liara. That's part of learning. The question isn't whether it happens. It's what you do afterward. His words settled over her, heavy but grounding. She nodded, her violet skin catching the sunlight as she turned her focus back to the task at hand. What's next? Felix's grin widened. You asked for it. He walked to the far end of the room, where a collection of tools and parts had been cleared away to create an open pathway. He grabbed a small crate and placed it squarely in the middle of the space. We're working on control. Step over this. Liara raised an eyebrow. Seriously? I just started walking yesterday. Exactly, Felix said, his tone teasing but firm. The faster you challenge yourself, the faster your body and mind adapt. She sighed, rolling her shoulders. The crate seemed taller than it had any right to be, a symbol of everything she hadn't mastered yet. But she knew Felix was right. Hesitation wouldn't help her reclaim her life. Approaching the crate, she focused on her movements. Each step felt deliberate, the prosthetic responding with mechanical precision. When she reached the crate, she hesitated, her breath catching. The idea of lifting her leg high enough to clear it felt absurd. You've got this, Felix called, his voice steady. Shift your weight, lift the leg, and step. Trust it. She closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. On the first attempt, her prosthetic snagged on the crate's edge, and she stumbled. Felix was by her side instantly, steadying her before she could fall. Try again, he said, his tone encouraging but unyielding. This time, she adjusted her balance, lifting the prosthetic higher. The motion was clumsy but successful. When her foot landed on the other side, a wave of triumph surged through her. There it is, Felix said, grinning. Now let's do it again. For the next hour, Felix guided her through increasingly difficult maneuvers. They moved from stepping over crates to balancing on uneven surfaces, each challenge pushing her limits. She stumbled often, her frustration bubbling up more than once, but Felix's calm persistence kept her moving forward. By the time they stopped, her body ached, but the ache was a welcome reminder of progress. She slumped into a chair, breathing heavily, her violet skin glistening faintly with exertion. Felix handed her a bottle of water, his own face marked with a sheen of sweat. You're a natural, he said, sitting across from her. I don't feel like one, Liara replied, her voice laced with exhaustion. I feel like a walking disaster. Felix shook his head. Disasters don't get back up after every fall. You're stronger than you think. She looked at him, her chest tightening at the sincerity in his words. Before she could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the workshop. Felix's expression darkened instantly. He stood, his posture stiffening. Stay here, he said quietly. Liara watched as he crossed the room to the door, his movements cautious. When he opened it, a woman stood on the threshold. She was tall and sharply dressed, her dark suit immaculate despite the morning's faint drizzle. Her piercing gaze swept over Felix and then into the room, landing briefly on Liara. Felix Ward, the woman said, her tone brisk. You've been flagged for unregulated alien technology use. Felix leaned against the doorframe, his demeanor casual but his eyes alert. Funny, I don't remember inviting anyone from the council into my workshop. This isn't a social call, the woman replied. Your activities have raised concerns. You're known for bending the rules, but this time, you've crossed a line. Felix's smile thinned. Everything I use is legal. The woman's gaze hardened. You and I both know that's not true. The council has tolerated your creative methods so far, but your recent project is pushing their patience. Liara tensed, her heart pounding. She glanced at her prosthetic, its sleek design suddenly feeling conspicuous. Was she the reason for this scrutiny? Felix stepped forward slightly, blocking the woman's view of the room. I don't answer to the council. If they have an issue, they can file a complaint. The woman's lips curled into a faint, cold smile. Consider this your first warning. The council is watching Ward. Don't give them a reason to act. With that, she turned and strode away, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. Felix shut the door with more force than necessary, his jaw tight. Who was that? Liara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Trouble, Felix muttered, running a hand through his hair. The council doesn't like people working outside their system. They've been breathing down my neck for years. Liara frowned, guilt gnawing at her. Am I putting you at risk? Felix shook his head, turning to face her. This isn't your fault. They've been looking for an excuse to shut me down for a long time. You're just the latest reason. She straightened, her determination hardening. Then we won't give them one. Felix stared at her, surprise flickering across his face before it softened into a grin. You've got more fight in you than I thought. You gave me a chance to stand, she said firmly. The least I can do is help you keep yours. Felix laughed. The sound warmed despite the tension in the air. All right, Liara. Let's see just how far we can push this. As he turned back to his workbench, Liara glanced at her prosthetic, the metallic limb gleaming faintly in the morning light. She wasn't just learning to walk. She was preparing to fight for the life she'd been denied. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to meet them head-on, step by determined step. The days following the councilwoman's visit were tense. Felix worked longer hours, his movements sharper, his focus more intense. Liara, attuned to his shifts in mood, sensed the pressure he tried to conceal. The hum of machinery in the workshop grew louder, the clang of tools more frequent. Felix didn't complain, but the weight of the council's warning loomed over them both. Liara threw herself into her training. She practiced walking, then running, pushing the prosthetic to its limits. Each movement brought a mixture of triumph and frustration. The leg was an engineering marvel, but it couldn't erase years of dependency or the memories of her wheelchair. She fought through every stumble, every misstep, determined not to waste the chance Felix had given her. On the fourth morning, Felix handed her a package wrapped in simple brown paper. His grin was the first real smile she'd seen from him since the council's visit. Go on, he said, gesturing at the package. Liara tore through the wrapping, her fingers fumbling with anticipation. Inside was a small control device, its sleek black surface gleaming. Alongside it, a pair of gloves with faintly glowing fingertips caught the light. What is this? She asked, looking up. Felix's grin widened. Upgrades. The gloves will enhance your grip strength, and the control device allows you to adjust the prosthetic sensitivity. You'll be able to move faster, with more precision. Her eyes widened. You've been working on this all week? Felix shrugged, feigning nonchalance. Couldn't sleep anyway. Might as well make myself useful. Liara laughed softly, shaking her head. You're something else, Felix. He arched a brow. Is that a compliment? Take it however you want, she said, sliding the gloves on. They fit perfectly, the glowing tips sparking faintly as they synced with her body. She flexed her fingers, marveling at the increased strength. Let's see what you can do, Felix said, stepping back to give her space. She tested the gloves first, gripping a heavy wrench and lifting it effortlessly. Her grin matched Felix's as she moved on to the prosthetic. With the control device, her movements felt smoother, almost instinctive. It was like discovering a new language, one her body already understood. For a moment, she let herself revel in the progress. But as the day wore on, a question began to gnaw at her. Why had Felix poured so much energy into helping her? Was it just his nature, or was there something more driving him? That evening, as they sat across from each other at the workshop's cluttered table, Liara decided to ask. Why do you do it? She said, breaking the comfortable silence. Felix looked up from the sketches he was working on, his expression curious. Do what? Help people like me. Go against the council. Take risks when it would be easier not to. Felix leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting to the ceiling. For a moment, Liara thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. Because I know what it's like to lose something that defines you, he said finally. I was a pilot once back when humans were expanding into the outer colonies. It was my whole life. Flying, exploring, being part of something bigger. Then, one mission went sideways. The ship's control system failed, and I crashed. Lost my leg and most of my nerve function in my left arm. Liara's breath caught. She hadn't expected this. You have a prosthetic too? Felix nodded, tapping his left leg. It's not as advanced as yours, but it works. After the crash, I spent months feeling sorry for myself, thinking my life was over. Then someone gave me a chance, a grumpy old engineer who believed in fixing things, not giving up on them. He taught me everything I know. He looked at her, his gaze steady. Helping you is my way of paying that forward. And sticking it to the council? That's just a bonus. Liara smiled, her chest tightening at the raw honesty in his words. Thank you, she said softly. For everything. Before Felix could respond, a loud crash echoed outside the workshop. Both of them froze. Felix stood quickly, his expression darkening. Stay here. Felix, Liara began, but he was already moving toward the door. He opened it cautiously, peering into the dimly lit alley. A group of men stood at the edge of the workshop's perimeter, their figures shadowed, but unmistakably hostile. One of them stepped forward, his voice sharp. Felix Ward, you've been warned about unauthorized tech. Time to shut this operation down. Felix stepped outside, his posture tense but calm. This is private property. You don't have the authority to be here. The man chuckled darkly. The council thinks otherwise. You've been flagged as a threat, and we're here to make sure you don't become a bigger problem. Inside, Liara's heart raced. She couldn't see their faces, but their tone left no doubt. They weren't here to talk. Her gaze flicked to the tools scattered across the workshop, her mind racing. She wouldn't sit by and let Felix face this alone. Grabbing a long wrench, she moved toward the door, her prosthetic clicking softly against the floor. Felix was arguing with the men, his voice steady but growing firmer. You don't scare me, Felix said. And if you think you can intimidate me into shutting down, you don't know me very well. The man stepped closer, his hand moving to his side where a weapon was holstered. We don't need you to cooperate, Ward. We just need you out of the way. Liara pushed the door open, stepping into the alley. The group turned to face her, their eyes narrowing. Felix's expression shifted from frustration to alarm. Liara, get back inside, he said sharply. She ignored him, her voice cutting through the tension. If you're here because of me, then say it. Don't hide behind bureaucratic nonsense. The man smirked. Bold for someone who's only walking because of stolen tech. You should have stayed in the shadows. Liara tightened her grip on the wrench. I've spent enough time in the shadows. Felix moved to step in front of her, but Liara stopped him, her prosthetic leg pressing against the ground with unwavering strength. We're not running, she said firmly. For a moment, the alley was silent except for the hum of distant machinery. Then the man stepped back, motioning to his group. You're making a mistake, he said, his tone cold. The council won't tolerate this. He turned, leading the others away. Felix exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. What were you thinking? He said, his voice sharp but laced with concern. You could have gotten yourself hurt. Liara met his gaze, her expression unyielding. I'm not hiding anymore, Felix. You said I was stronger than I thought. It's time I start proving it. Felix stared at her for a long moment before nodding. All right, but next time, let me handle the scary guys with guns. A small smile tugged at her lips. Deal. As they stepped back into the workshop, Liara felt a flicker of something unfamiliar pride. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was standing, fighting, and refusing to let anyone push her back down. And with Felix by her side, she knew she wouldn't have to do it alone. The workshop was no longer a haven. The intrusion from the council's enforcers had turned it into a powder keg, ready to ignite with the smallest spark. Felix paced back and forth, his movements restless, his hands occasionally running through his disheveled hair. Liara watched him from her seat by the workbench, her prosthetic resting lightly against the floor. Every click it made as she shifted served as a reminder of the confrontation in the alley. What's the plan? She asked finally, her voice steady. Felix stopped mid-stride, his eyes meeting hers. Plan? The plan is to avoid drawing more attention until things cool down. Liara frowned. That's not a plan. That's waiting for them to come back stronger. Felix sighed, leaning against the edge of the table. Liara, these people don't play fair. They have the council's resources, legal or otherwise. You saw what they were willing to do. We push back, and they'll hit harder. So what? She said, her tone sharper than intended. We let them win? Let them destroy everything you've built? Everything we've worked for? Felix hesitated. His shoulders sagged, the weight of his defiance pressing heavily on him. It's not that simple. It never is, Liara said, standing. Her prosthetic clicked as she crossed the room, each step deliberate. But hiding won't protect you, and it definitely won't protect me. Felix opened his mouth to argue, but a sudden knock on the door cut him off. They both froze, tension thickening the air. Felix gestured for Liara to stay back as he approached the door, his movements cautious. He opened it just enough to see outside. Delivery, a voice called, neutral and calm. Felix relaxed slightly and opened the door wider. A courier stood there, holding a small package. Felix accepted it with a nod and closed the door quickly, turning the package over in his hands. What is it? Liara asked, stepping closer. Felix frowned. I wasn't expecting anything. He carefully unwrapped the package, revealing a small, rectangular device. Its surface was smooth, featureless except for a faintly glowing symbol etched into the corner. A mark Liara didn't recognize, but Felix clearly did. His expression darkened. What is it? She repeated more urgently. Felix set the device down on the table as if it might explode. It's from the council. Liara stared at it, her pulse quickening. What does it do? Felix didn't answer immediately. Instead, he grabbed a small tool and pried open a panel on the device's side. A faint hum emerged as it activated, projecting a holographic message into the air. A familiar figure appeared, the councilwoman who had confronted them in the alley. Her expression was cold, her voice measured. Felix Ward, this is your final warning. Cease all unauthorized projects immediately, or we will escalate our response. The council does not tolerate defiance. The hologram flickered, and the message repeated once before fading. Felix's jaw tightened as he stared at the now silent device. They're trying to scare you, Liara said, her voice low but firm. And they think it'll work. Felix exhaled slowly, his hands gripping the edge of the table. It's not just me they're after, Liara. If they decide you're a threat, they won't stop until they have you too. Then let's give them a reason to see me as a threat, she said, her violet eyes blazing. I'm not hiding anymore, Felix. I can't. Felix looked at her, his frustration softening into something closer to admiration. You're serious? Deadly, she said. You gave me the chance to stand. Now it's time to fight. Felix's lips twitched into a small smile despite the tension. All right, if we're doing this, we need a plan. The plan came together in hurried whispers and quiet movements. Felix pulled up schematics and tools, while Liara studied every detail he showed her. They worked late into the night, refining the prosthetics' capabilities and upgrading the gloves Felix had given her. Each modification was designed for efficiency, precision, and, if necessary, self-defense. By dawn, Liara stood in the center of the workshop, testing her enhanced movements. The prosthetics' responsiveness had improved tenfold. Her steps were smoother, faster, and quieter. The gloves, now integrated with the control device, allowed her to manipulate objects with unprecedented strength and dexterity. Felix watched her with a mixture of pride and trepidation. "You're ready?" Liara turned to him, her expression fierce. "We both are." The council didn't make them wait long. 2 nights later, they came again, this time with more force. Liara and Felix heard the vehicles before they saw them, the low rumble of engines echoing down the alley. Felix's face was grim as he powered down the workshop's lights, casting them into shadow. "They'll come through the front," he said quietly. "You're faster than they'll expect. Use that." Liara nodded, her heart pounding. She positioned herself near the side of the room, hidden but ready. Felix stood near the door, tools scattered around him, as if he were simply working late. The knock came, louder this time, followed by a barked command. Felix Ward, open the door. We have a warrant. Felix didn't move. The knock came again, sharper. When Felix still didn't respond, the door burst open, and 3 enforcers stormed in, weapons drawn. Their leader stepped forward, his face partially obscured by a visor. Felix Ward, you are under arrest for violating council regulations. Step away from the table. Felix raised his hand slowly, his expression calm. You're making a mistake. The leader ignored him, signaling for the others to search the room. As one of them approached the far corner, Liara moved. Her prosthetic leg made no sound as she stepped into the enforcer's blind spot. Before he could react, she grabbed his weapon and twisted it from his hands, her gloves sparking faintly. What the? He started, but Liara silenced him with a swift kick that sent him sprawling. The commotion drew the others' attention. Felix took advantage of the distraction, grabbing a device from the table and activating it. The lights in the room flickered before plunging the workshop into darkness. Liara moved through the shadows like a phantom, her prosthetics upgrades allowing her to outmaneuver the enforcers with ease. She disarmed the second one before he could fire, his weapon clattering uselessly to the floor. The leader, realizing he was outmatched, reached for a communicator. We need backup. Liara's hand closed around his wrist, the glowing tips of her gloves illuminating his visor. You're not calling anyone, she said, her voice cold. Felix stepped forward, his silhouette sharp in the dim light. Tell your council this. We're not running, and we're not afraid. The leader hesitated, his gaze flicking between Felix and Liara. Finally, he nodded, his posture stiff. This isn't over. As the enforcers retreated, Liara turned to Felix, her breath steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. Think they got the message? Felix chuckled, a low, relieved sound. If they didn't, they will. For the first time, Liara felt more than capable. She felt powerful, and she knew this was only the beginning. Together, she and Felix would stand their ground and fight for a future no council could control.